The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Hello again, everybody, and Merry Christmas. I think it's legal to say that again. You know, for a few years, they looked at you cross-eyed if you said, Merry Christmas. It was like, what did he just say? Call the thought police. You can't do that. You were supposed to say season's greetings or happy holidays or Feliz Navidad or whatever. But I am glad to be back in a country where I can wish all of you a wonderful holiday season and a very Merry Christmas. And I don't get offended if we talk about any other religion and any observance they have. You never know what you're going to get here on Need to Know. I'm Kip Kiefer. We are glad to have you on board. But just starting the show this way, it gives me the thought right off the bat of saying something that I'm sure all of you have thought about for many years as well, that I don't ever have the inclination if somebody talks about, and I don't want to just try to click off holidays. I'm not showing disrespect for any faith or any religion. I respect them all. I respect a person's ability to have personal beliefs, but it never offended me, and it wouldn't have offended me or affected me as a young person to have somebody in school talk about some other religion and some other observance and some other faith. So it always amazed me in these years of the woke revolution in this country that thankfully seems to be fizzling out with the voices of the American people were registered loud and clear on November 5th. But any reference to Christmas trees and ornaments and manger scenes and lighting and whatnot, that was or any observance in a school where maybe a child that's of Muslim or Hindu persuasion, Jewish persuasion, take your pick, how that was offensive to an individual, that the predominant observance in this holiday season was for Christmas, never really registered with me, because I never had the slightest inclination of ever being offended by anyone's religious observance. So I never understood that whole stigma, but now it looks like we're finally getting back. And the first indicator was when Target back in like July 4th put out their Christmas decorations. And that's how geeked up and geared up these retailers get for this time of the year. They start to roll out the red carpet for holiday shopping in July or August. But when Target came out with a bunch of displays this year that said Merry Christmas, it was like, oh boy, we've turned the corner. One of our largest retailers is actually acknowledging again, after 7 or 8 years on the dark side, that Christmas is a major holiday in this particular country. The birth of Jesus Christ, the whole concept of Christmas, Christ Mass, is back in the spotlight, and it should never have gone away. It was just another example of just how whacked out and crazy we had gotten in this country of worrying about offending somebody. How do you offend somebody by observing and celebrating your religion and wishing complete strangers on the street tidings of great joy and celebration? It's insane. So again, as I tend to do on the Need to Know podcast here on TKR, I start off in a direction that I had no clue that I was going to go, because what I do want to talk about today is something I saw overnight on the news. I'm kind of I'm just one of these people that goes to sleep, but I don't like just total darkness and dead silence. I know that's what you're supposed to do. I understand that that's best for your rhythmic sleeping and your effectiveness to sleep. But I'm just at a point where I like to have some other noise going on, some other ambient sound. I know some people have water, crashing the waves, or birds singing or whatever on these devices. I know people that take these portable deals to have kind of natural sounds. I don't really dig that because I find myself kind of I don't know. I don't get into the flow of that. There'll be like a soothing sound, and then something completely different will pop up, and it gets my attention. I really, to be honest, haven't really tried those things, but I like to have information. And if there's something big going on in sports or news, I pick a channel and keep my television on in my room when I'm falling asleep. I don't watch it. I just kind of listen to it. And I don't have the volume up very high, but I always just kind of like to have that because if something big happens overnight, I like to roll over and be aware of what's going on. So a lot of people think that's insane. I've had women who've actually wanted to break up with me because I don't like darkness and silence. That's just not my thing. So I did hear an item overnight, and I didn't know this event was even going on. I had a plan to go a different direction today, but I want to talk about this because last night in Washington, they had the DNC, the Democrat National Committee's Christmas party, which I bet that was just a uproarious affair. I've always made the joke about if somebody gives me an all expense paid trip to go on an all leftist cruise, I'm going to have to respectively tell them to pass that on to somebody else because I can't imagine being around such miserable people for an extended period on the high seas. So last night, the big Christmas party was going on, and they had America's most glorious speaker. There has been a sighting of one Joe Biden, who ever since November 5th election is still the president in name, but Joe's not doing much these days other than trying to come up with ways to agitate not only everybody else in America that didn't vote for his stand-in Kamala Harris, but also he's doing things that are aggravating even his own party. Like after saying repeatedly that he would not even consider pardoning his son Hunter, we all knew that was BS. He was going to do that no matter what. And people acted surprised because he said he wouldn't do it. Well, I wasn't surprised. I knew he would do it. I'm a dad. If I was in that position, I'm sure I would have done it. I don't want my child in prison, whether it's deserved or not, unless they did something really hideous. But even then, as a father, you're going to look for all the good you can in your child. So I didn't think that was that shocking. But he did say repeatedly that he would not intervene. And the excuses he gave were absolutely astounding if you listen to any of that in a mumbling, bumbling, fumbling, stumbling fashion. He said that the Department of Justice had only persecuted and prosecuted Hunter Biden because he was the son of the president. Now, think about that. This is a Department of Justice who threw everything but the kitchen sink at Donald Trump because he was their political enemy. They charged him with some of the most nonsensical things of all time and didn't charge others that were guilty of other crimes that they slammed him with 50 or 60 different charges on various indictments. The Department of Justice was totally weaponized against Donald Trump. So why in the world, why in the hell was the guy at the head of this, although, as we know, he wasn't directing any of it because if you've listened to this program, we told you early on that Joe Biden was not in charge of, and pardon my French here, jack shit. Joe Biden was a figurehead. He was a placeholder. He was a guy that occasionally they had ran out there to the podium to hopefully get through a brief statement of reading something, didn't take questions, didn't do interviews. He was the front man for the third term of Barack Obama. And Joe Biden, in that role, performed exactly like they wanted him to. And in fact, when it came time for reelection, he had said he was just a placeholder, a one-term president. We all know the story. Joe was starting to like the trappings of being able to go to Washington for a couple days a week, hang around, and then fly back to Delaware on Air Force One for 5-day weekends at either his mansion in Wilmington or his exclusive beach house, for which he paid $3 million cash a few years ago. I got $3 million lying around for a beach house. All of you, why don't we all just hang out at our own beach houses every weekend? Joe Biden, Joe civil servant, paying $3 million in cash. I wonder where that came from, aka Hunter Biden pardon. Anyway, with all that being said, Joe Biden had not been in charge of anything, just been a placeholder, a figurehead, and they were perfectly happy to reinstate him into that position when he declared he wanted to seek another term. And it was this big, supposedly they thought they were getting away with this charade of presenting him as vigorous and he outworks everybody at the White House, and Kamala Harris saying, I can't keep up with him. And I mean, it was so obvious when you did see him in public that this guy was anything but vigorous. He was barely functional. He was the perfect stooge, marionette puppet to put out front, while the Barack Obama machine, who he was surrounded by in his cabinet, that had been placed in all and every important department, bureau, and agency in Washington as the leaders and directors of those entities, all of that was in place. So the directions on what this country has done in the last 4 years, between Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2021, until now, coming up on January 20th, 2025, it's obvious since the election on November 5th of this year, Biden has not even been serving in a pretend capacity of president. He's barely even been seen, except for popping up for these pardons, which is something that is within his purview. And because he was motivated by his son, this week he even topped that by excusing 1,500 people in one day from various charges, most based on a loose criteria of, quote, nonviolent offenders being released from jail. But the controversial one was a judge from Pennsylvania back in 2011 who was arrested and convicted, I think in 2013, of one of the most just disgusting scandals ever, where he was taking minor offenders, young people mostly, for different things like public drunkenness or possession of drugs, charges that they some of them were even minors, and he had supported a case that led to the elimination of one of the county detention situations where his jurisdiction was, because his son and some other people that he was involved with had opened a private detention situation, jail, prison, whatever you want to call it, a rehabilitative sort of, that was the excuse, that they were using new techniques. And this guy started taking all the people that were in the county program and sentencing them to do time in this private institution that, by all reports, was just a hell on earth kind of experience. Militaristic and abusive, and there've been tons of different stories come out of kids coming out of that program and young adults, and they were all messed up, went back into crime, got messed up on drugs. There was one lady's son that committed suicide because he was so mentally traumatized by that experience. But in the meantime, this judge, for every single person he sent to this private detention center, was cashing in big time. And they had the records to show that in the couple of years that this scam was going on, and he was sending human beings to be subject to this ridiculous treatment, he profited by over $2 million. Guess what? Joe Biden let him out of prison this week. Do you think that incensed some people? It's really abusive. Pardons have always been part of the president's abilities in his office. And in this case, Biden has taken it to a level of absolute absurdity, because you look at cases where decisions were too harsh, and there was, I remember Donald Trump pardoned a lady that actually got implicated. Her sons were running a big drug operation out of her house, and she became kind of, at first, an unwitting participant, but then kind of settled into that. She was an elderly black lady that, seemed like church going, salt of the earth. And she ended up getting sentenced to like 25 years for being a drug kingpin when, again, she never claimed to be innocent, but she certainly wasn't the brains of the operation. She basically let it operate out of her home. Trump was brought up to date of what wonderful work she was doing in prison with other incarcerated ladies that have gone the wrong direction. And, that's the kind of person that, after her serving 6 or 7, 8, I don't matter how long it was, but it was a real high profile case. And there were others too, where unlikely people came and appealed to Trump to try and get people out. Kim Kardashian famously came and pitched for another person that was jailed harshly. Anyway, that's what a pardon is meant to do. It is not a blanket, okay, we're going to excuse everybody from this period of time that are in for nonviolent offenses, because it's not cookie cutter. It's not the same thing. Every case is different. Every circumstance is different. So Joe Biden has been only active in that sense. But I want to get to the point here. Last night, in his remarks that I heard as I was half asleep, Joe Biden started off his bumbling, stumbling, bumbling, fumbling remarks in front of the DNC Christmas gathering, which, again, I just can't imagine a more joyous occasion after the ass whooping they took back in November, where the American people repudiated and rejected all of these policies that they have worked night and day painstakingly to try and put in place for all these years. Biden declared, well, the mark of any successful endeavor is to leave a place better than you found it. And as president, that's what we've done. For what we inherited, look what we're leaving behind. Joe, are you kidding me? What you're leaving behind is scorched earth. You're leaving behind a country that you have put further and further in economic distress and danger that we couldn't even conceive of, by passing these trillion-dollar programs that basically just pass money out to all your cronies and supporters for all these ridiculous things that you instituted in your presidency, and put us in much more economic distress, drove inflation to the highest level it's been in more than a century, made everybody's trip to the grocery store, the gas station, any online purchase, prices are sky high. People can't afford to live. They got to make decisions between prescriptions and food, leisure time, vacations, forget it. So many people in this country are struggling because just the cost of living has become so exorbitant, and you can make all the excuses you want. You can say the economy is thriving, that business is increasing, that jobs have increased, although that's been proven to be false, because those reports were being manipulated to show huge job growth when there really wasn't very much at all. And the only sector that was really gaining steam in terms of jobs in this country was in the worst place possible, government, because so much of the ridiculous spending and the terrible debt problems we have are traced right back to the federal government, which is the greatest growth industry in the history of the world. It is the big bang boom business that is just going gangbusters right now. And this new administration, with Donald Trump coming in, with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and all of the new agency and department heads, it's time to pull the plug, flush the toilet, get rid of all of these people that Barack Obama, in his 2 terms, so expertly inserted into the process. But it changed everything in Washington because it politicized every area of life as we know it in this country. And it's probably not going to be able to be completely undone, but it's time to say, hey, this is enough of this. We're building a wall figuratively on the southern border, which is another area of concern from this great we have left it better than we found it administration's legacy. But the wall also needs to be built in Washington, D.C., in the deep state. I told you last week, I heard just a classic flipping around. I heard a MSNBC commentator in one paragraph say, well, you just wait. Musk and Ramaswamy have no idea what they're in for. It is a fierce bureaucracy who's going to fight them and resist them at every turn. And then in about 2 more breaths, he started talking about Kash Patel, who's the nominee to take over the FBI, which is the most disgusting, weaponized agency, supposed to be the premier law enforcement agency in the world. They have become completely regimented to a political agenda, and the performance of Christopher Wray and his sad excuse for the premier law enforcement agency in the country is going to be completely overhauled. And this guy, just after saying how fierce the bureaucracy resistance is going to be, said Kash Patel, author of a book about the Washington, D.C. deep state, which, as we know, does not even exist. Said it with that kind of arrogance and that kind of, dismissive attitude of like, that's just ridiculous to suggest we've got a deep state, just after saying that the fierce Washington bureaucracy, this just in, folks, the fierce Washington bureaucracy is the deep state. I said it last week and I'll say it again and I'll keep saying it. This denial that Washington and the federal government that has been put in place in the last, since 2008, the Barack Obama term, Trump ran into it big time in 2016 when he became president and learned a lot of lessons about how Washington works. And this goes back even before that. Go back to the Jimmy Carter administration in 1976. He went up there with all these ideas that he was going to reform things. He was an outsider. The organism rejected him, made him look like a complete buffoon, which he basically was. But they did not support him at all because he wanted to make changes to the structure of the federal government. This is an entity unto itself. It's out of control and it needs to be reined in. And the suggestion that this country is better off than it was 4 years ago is absolute buffoonery, because it is in no way in better shape than it was when President Biden took office on January 20th of 2021. You can look at departments like the Homeland Security Agency. Right now, we've got these drone reports all up and down the East Coast, particularly in New Jersey and in parts of New York. The federal government, the Department of Homeland Security. Now, think about that. It's the Department of Homeland Security. Mayorkas said yesterday in a statement, We don't know who's responsible for these drones. And at this stage, we're not even that concerned about it because this is, get ready for it, a local law enforcement issue. Really? So we've got county sheriffs and run of the mill small town police officers in areas and even around military bases. You've got these things flying around airports, military bases, and they have the gall to tell you that this is a local law enforcement situation, that these are just hobbyists. And I know probably a lot of them are because everybody and their brother-in-law all of a sudden has their own drone. The guy that tried to assassinate Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, 20 years old, was flying one around the site that morning doing reconnaissance on the positioning of all the Secret Service and other operatives. And not only was he flying one around, he had another one in his car when they cleaned it out after he didn't fare too well in his assassination attempt, taking a bullet in the side of the head himself. But this guy was packing 2 drones. So a lot of these drones are hobbyists, and I'm sure people wanting to get in on the mystique of this situation. But there's a lot not being said. And for the director of Homeland Security to shrug it off and say, well, this really at this stage isn't our problem, is absolutely ridiculous and shows you in great clarity what this government has dwindled down to. And it's just one of so many examples. I've got a quick thought. As you know, on this show, we kind of try to apply some common sense. And usually my kind of approach to that is, who would really benefit from this? We had a giant spy balloon sent by China, which entered our territory through Alaska, the farthest reaches of the northwest corner of our continent. It came down through the Dakotas and cut a path right through the center of the country and was allowed for 4 or 5 days to hover over military establishments, to go from the northwest corner all the way through to South Carolina, where it exited the country back into the ocean, I guess on its way back to be a place where they could recover it, although it was transmitting data all the time. Finally, the Biden administration shot it down when it got out over the ocean, the excuse being they were afraid to take it down over the continental U.S. because there may have been people hurt. This was a spy balloon that was allowed to go coast to coast. Now, all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, we have 35,000. Let me say that number again. 35,000 military-aged Chinese young men who have entered this country, not with their families, not with their wives, not with their brother-in-law. They are individual, male, Chinese, military-aged guys. And they all came in well-dressed, carrying the same kind of satchel, carry-on, backpack, whatever you want to call it. It looked like they were being just dispersed here. And you have to wonder, there was an arrest that didn't get much publicity about a week ago in California. A Chinese individual was flying a drone around a U.S. military base. A lot of these drones in New Jersey have been around the big Air Force base there. This reconnaissance that the Chinese started with the spy balloon, and knowing that this administration is so limp-wristed and weak-kneed that they wouldn't do anything about it except make excuses. Don't you think there's a strong possibility that these 35,000 people that have been dispatched to this country, where you just don't walk out of China and say, hey, I'll check you later, I'm heading to America, marching in here with their standard kits, I would think logically you would have to assume that if this reconnaissance is important to China and gathering all of this information they have been trying to do, if there are any drones being deployed that are mysterious in origin, I think that's a pretty good place to start the investigation. What do you think? Anyway, that's just sort of some of the things I was thinking about. But we've got anywhere from 17 to 20 million illegal people in this country, including 100, and this is an estimate, 125,000 convicted felons that were found guilty of major crimes, a lot of them violent crimes in their home countries. We've got whole gangs and crime organizations that have relocated to this country. We've got all kinds of people that are forcing children and people in impoverished communities out of community centers and places they can go to house these illegals that have come to this country, not seeking a better life in America. They've come here because there's free stuff. Our country sucks, but they're giving away free stuff in America. And in a lot of cases, we flew them into the country or right to the border. These people didn't walk from Sudan or from Yemen or from God knows where else, any place in Africa. These people were transported here and they show up with fresh clothes and a cell phone. These are not bedraggled migrants who are on their last legs staggering to the border looking for assistance. This was not immigration. Do not buy the illegal immigration term. This was not immigration. This was intentional importation. And the reason, because Democrats knew that if they can maintain power, that American people were never going to yield their liberty and freedom and toss that in. So they needed to import a whole new block of people because they've already alienated many of the minorities, so many of the unions, all the people that were the backbone of their party. They had to replace those people by bringing in these subservient, very cooperative, imported migrants intentionally. This was not ineptitude. This was on purpose. And that's why they're here. And that's why you still hear liberal leftist governors and mayors saying, we're going to fight the Trump administration and not allow them to interfere with our residents. These illegals now are not citizens, but they are their residents because they are developing these people, hoping that they will somehow gain citizenship and be legal voters sooner than later and give the Democrats a gigantic block of voters that they can exploit for the next bunch of years. And they will have babies who will have babies and bring through chain migration even more illegals into this country. This is the grand plan, and it's why they are even against deporting these criminals. 125,000 of them. We see American citizens being raped and murdered. We see children being sexually abused, but they're standing up for these fine potential citizens because it's all part of the plan. It's the only explanation. It is the correct explanation, and you need to think about that as you watch events go forward. So Joe Biden, better off than it was 4 years ago. Somebody get Joe a chocolate chip ice cream and set up his beach chair so he can have a seat and watch the waves roll in. If you've seen footage of him trying to set up his own chair, it's not a pretty sight. So, Joe, go to the House, get the hell out of there, let Donald Trump and his crew come in, and the eyes of the world and all Americans are upon Trump and his complete overhaul of this government, which is way overdue, and his standards are high and his feet are held to the fire. So let's see if they hit the ground running as intended in these first 100 days and affect some major, way overdue change. That's the Need to Know show for this week. We always appreciate all of you. Once again, it gives me great joy to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. We'll be with you next Monday for a new show Christmas week to give you season's greetings and our perspective of what you need to know then. I'm Kip Kiefer. Thanks to the TKR Network. Have a great week, everybody.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.